So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar, Building a Seamless Website Journey, the importance of the website user experience in digital trust. We're very excited to have so many of you joining us here today. And if you want to drop in the chat, we'd love to hear where you're joining from as well. We're very excited to talk about this topic today. But before we kick it off, I did just want to go through a few quick housekeeping items. So there are live transcriptions here on Zoom. So if that is something you would like to enable, please feel free to utilize those. We will, of course, also be sending out the recording after the webinar. It will have closed captions, and it does just take us a few days to process those. So please do be patient with us, and we will send out the recording and the slides after the session in a couple of days. And of course, we encourage questions of all kinds during our session. We have reserved some time at the end. So please feel free to drop any questions that you may have in the Q&A panel, and we'll try to get to them all at the end. I also know we have some pre-submitted questions, so we'll also make sure to prioritize those. I'll also note that we do have a team member named Moncito Webinars monitoring the chat. So if you have any issues or questions or need help, please feel free to just flag that during the session as well. And my wonderful colleague, Kristen, who is manning that, will help out. All right, well, before we jump into what we're going to talk about today and do a quick agenda, I did just want to quickly introduce myself as well as our guest speaker. So my name is Jasmine Hansen de Guzman. I am the Director of International Marketing at Moncito, which is now very excitedly powered by Acquia. And I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a sneak preview into what that just means in a couple seconds. My background is really in the website space, so I've been working in the SaaS website world for the past 10 years, doing websites for small businesses. So really excited to talk about digital trust because it's something that's not only important for small businesses, but all businesses, and there's so many elements that go into it. And Ronnie is our guest speaker today, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Yes, thank you. Hi. My name's Ronnie. I'm based in the Netherlands. Currently head of accessibility at Nemensa, a Bristol-based, mainly Bristol-based user experience agency, where I lead the accessibility team. I mean, my history in accessibility spans over the past 2 decades, really. Got confronted by it as a developer developing repeated stress injury. Dabbled in university study for social work as kind of a deviation, and eventually ended up in the accessibility field pretty much after that. And it combines both my love for technology as well as my love for humans. So yeah, it's been a good fit.
Wonderful. We're so excited to have you here today, Ronnie, because your love for humans and your love for technology fit in really well with our topic of digital trust, which is what we're going to tackle today, because those two things are instrumental to that experience. So a little quick agenda. We've gone through the housekeeping. We've done some quick introductions. I'm going to give a quick introduction to Acquia as well. Just so you guys know what to expect, we're going to talk for about the next 30 minutes or so, where we're just going to talk about how we're defining digital trust and what those different elements that we've seen in the space that really impact it. Love for you guys to contribute your own experiences and stories in the chat as well. And then we'll round off with another audience poll at the very end and some Q&A. But before we jump into the first kind of question that we want to get you guys all engaged, I did just want to share. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Moncito is a web optimization accessibility platform, and we have recently joined Acquia, the digital experience leader, in early January. So for those of you who are like, oh, what is Moncito? How is it connected to Acquia? Moncito is now part of Acquia, and we're very excited. It is a very reputable company and is actually partnered with Nemensa, so we're very honored to actually have Nemensa here as well today. But just a couple quick facts about what is happening. And with that, let's kick it off into the content. And the first thing we want to ask you, and I will launch a poll, but you're also welcome to just put it into the chat. But what do you think makes your website trustworthy? So let me hit launch here. And I think you can either add a long answer, otherwise also feel free to just put it into the chat. We're very curious because obviously there's so many different elements, and as Ronnie and I have been preparing for this webinar, we've actually been exchanging a lot of our own experiences of different elements that have made websites trustworthy or not trustworthy. Yeah, what were you going to say, Ronnie?
Yeah, I was going to say we had pretty much on the fly examples ready to go based on our conversations already. So of things that happen all the time. It's like you said, Jasmine, like the more you dive into it as a subject, the more you're recognizing it everywhere you go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's been really interesting prepping for it today and just getting more awareness of it. We're hoping to share that today, of course, with the rest of the audience.
Definitely. And I can see, it looks like there's a couple of people who've answered, but speaking of digital trust, Zoom updated their polling mechanism. So I'm not sure if I can figure out how to see the answers. So if anyone wants to share in the chat as well, we'd love for you guys to share some of your experiences there. But I will try to click around here and open it. But gotta love when the digital tools also don't make it as easy for a trustworthy experience in running these things. All right, I can see there's quite a few of you that have answered, but unfortunately I cannot see the answers. So if any of you do want to copy and paste those into the webinar chat, please do so. We'd love to hear what you think makes your website trustworthy today. Maybe I'll be able to extract the answers afterwards. But with that, let's just jump into the first thing that we want to talk about. Oops. Can everyone? Oh, my apologies. I can see that it is jumping around a little bit. We'll just jump into the first topic, which is defining digital trust in 2024. And I think there's always new trends coming in the digital space. I think digital trust is very much one of the things that we've seen being mentioned more and more, which is why I connected with Ronnie to try to talk about this. But Ronnie, do you just want to start from your perspective? Like, what does digital trust mean to you?
Yeah, so it was kind of interesting because when you reached out, I wasn't that familiar with it because it's not a term like our accessibility industry uses a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But I was surprised to kind of to see it as included in one of the pillars that define digital trust as a definition. Accessibility came in there. I mean, for me, digital trust and accessibility, like they got there's a lot of overlap there because a lot of things we do as accessibility specialists is trying to make sure that disabled users or people that rely on I think we call assistive technology, like things like screen readers, are able to use a website similar to how everyone else would be able to use a website. Unfortunately, they run into barriers very frequently, and that damages their trust. It means that if they can't, for example, complete an online purchase, they are very likely to go somewhere else and they won't come back. And you'll have a lot of work cut out for you to be able to regain their trust of trying it again, and they better not run into another barrier in that process, or otherwise you're literally back at square one. Yeah, so there's been an interesting overlap.
Definitely. And I think accessibility is such an important pillar of digital trust. For me as a marketer and communicator, and I can see actually we've gotten some of the answers in now. So thank you, Kristen, who's all behind the scenes for getting the answers, but thank you to all of you for sharing as well. It also has to do with how you're outwardly presenting yourself to the digital world. So I always say your website is your digital storefront. So just like you might have a physical space, your website is that space that you own online. Yes, you might have a social media profile or a Facebook profile, but Facebook can change the layout of that overnight and confuse people. The layout might be different. So your website is really the only place you own. And I can see there's a lot of the examples that you guys gave here of what makes your website trustworthy are those outward facing elements. So someone wrote a long list of happy customers. Absolutely, right? you're showing trust certificates, implementation of our brand identity. Those are all things that are an outward presentation of who you are, and helping the user kind of identify and navigate, like, is this a trustworthy brand that I want to engage with? And as marketers and communicators, or if you're whoever you might be on a website, the most important thing for your website is that it's attractive and people want to engage with you and are easily able to find the information that they're looking for on your website. So I think a lot of the things that you guys are saying makes your website trustworthy are probably some of the things that Ronnie and I are planning to touch on today, because it is just about giving a consistent, good user experience. And whether that is from an accessibility front, a design perspective, or content, or the technical setup of your website, there's so many micro elements that go into digital trust for me. And so you can't define it as one thing. It's many different small things that add up to you being a trustworthy digital experience or website experience. Ronnie, should we jump into some examples? Because I know we have a lot of them. And I think the first one we have here is actually something that the very first person in the chat mentioned, which is consistent and valid design. So we pulled a couple of different websites here, and the reason we wanted to pull a couple of different websites was to show this consistency in different elements. And Ronnie, maybe you want to comment a little bit on that.
Yeah, so one of the things we find in user research, for example, is having some familiarity with components that people are used to already, and you can sometimes end up in a bit of a like creative debate whether you want to exercise a new type of interface or a new type of UI component, when in all honesty, for things like digital trust and the general user experience, it might actually just be a much better bet to stick with what's been done before. We have a general, well, like web pages have a general structure, right? So we generally have a header, we have our core part of the content, and then we have a footer. So for a lot of different types of information, people know where to go look for that. If they want to navigate your website, they know they need to be at the top. If they're looking for contact details, especially within things like user research, you'll see people go down to the bottom of the page instantly and go look for a contact option there. If there's not something like explicitly called out in the header, for example. And then making, of course, sure that information is there for the user to find. That adds to that trust level.
Definitely. And I think it's all about helping people find the information where they're used to finding it, right? So most of us are used to finding, if we're doing online shopping, a policy about returns and exchanges somewhere in the footer. And if we can't find it there, it creates a very frustrating experience. Another alternative option from a user experience point of view is ensuring that you have a search bar. So while maybe Numensa and Moncito don't have the largest websites and therefore we don't have search bars, large websites like London Council, which is pictured here, and hotels.com, they have search bars because they just have such a massive amount of information on their site. So helping the user and guiding them in the journey is something that will make it more trustworthy, because you're getting them more quickly to where they need to be. And I think one of the other things to think about is this is just a website user experience principle that makes it easy for people to use your website. But imagine if it wasn't there, that creates a negative experience. And on top of that, it's just good accessibility practices to have some of these things. So for people with cognitive disabilities, for example, simplifying the user experience as much as possible and creating less steps for them to get the information they need is incredibly important.
I think one of the things that stands out for me personally is like mobile device usage has gone up, of course, over the past decade, but there's still so many websites out there that have an information or an e-commerce aspect that aren't mobile friendly, that aren't built with like responsive design in mind. From an accessibility point, that helps because like if people have bad vision, they might magnify the website on their desktop device, and they will then, or hopefully they're then presented with a responsive design that contains all of the same information and functionality. But from a trust perspective, just looking at my own experiences, like if I get a non-responsive website delivered on a mobile device while I'm on the road and I want to do something with your organization, that instantly like makes me hold back.
Yeah,
In terms of to engage with that, I can't be bothered to go pinch and zoom every single page and try and find information. So again, being consistent in that, and but also making sure that you cover that wide range of devices by making your website responsive. That helps for me as well.
Definitely. That's a really good point. I know myself, if I'm booking a restaurant, one of the most annoying things in some of these restaurant booking systems is when they ask you to make an account. And I'm like, why can't I just book a restaurant? And then I'm like, well, then maybe I should book something else, right? So every additional step you add in the user experience makes it more frustrating.
Yep.
We have another couple of examples here as well that I want to make sure we talk about. And it's again, some of the things that some of you have mentioned. And I'll start off here with a story and a little bit of an anecdote. So in the first screenshot we have here where it says, if you discover unauthorized use of your card. So this is actually a screenshot that I took myself because my credit card was used for a transaction that my bank didn't recognize. And I got a text message sent to myself. And the text message said, hey, your card has been used for a transaction. We have blocked it because we're unsure if it's fraudulent. Please call this phone number to unblock your card. Well, one of the other things Ronnie and I talked a lot about is the offline or other areas of the digital experience and how it's connected to your website. So because there is so much fraud going on, my first thought was, well, how do I make sure and verify that this text message that I'm getting is accurate and that the phone number that they're telling me to call is actually a phone number associated with the bank? So what I did was I took the phone number and I Googled it. And what it led me to was a website that's owned by the bank, danskebank.dk. You can see there's an SSL certificate. So it's showing me all of these different micro elements that are building up my trust. And there's actually a dedicated page saying, if you discover unauthorized use of your card, you will get a text message from us about it. You will receive it from this phone number and it will tell you to call this phone number. And so that was a very good example of why I really needed a website from my bank, for example, to help ensure that it was a trustworthy digital experience. And after that, I was able to call them and get my card unblocked. It wasn't a fraudulent, they were just being extra careful. But it's a really good example of all of the many different ways that you engage with your customers or your audience, all of those offline experiences you have. It's also important to have them documented on your website because your website is an authoritative source of information about your business or your organization and can really help set the expectation of what people should expect. So that was my little anecdote on that, at least. One of the other things that we also wanted to talk about was some of these different stamps of approval. And Ronnie, I'm gonna let you take this one because we know I'm gonna butcher the name of the Dutch organization again that gives the stamp of approval for e-commerce. So
Yeah, we've tried it a couple times, but to no success. Sorry.
no.
Yeah, so we have. You're gonna have to do the second one though, because although I think it's still eMarket, but the first one is thuiswinkel.org, which is an organization that basically allows e-commerce partners in the Netherlands to get verified, and there's they have a protocol that they need to follow. There needs to be some kinds of assurances for the customers in place, et cetera, et cetera. So when dealing with online transactions, people will look out for these types of stamps of approval, and they're there for other areas as well. Like we get asked for accessibility, for example, but like these types of organizations can provide you with some security. It takes a bit of a keen eye though as a user, because there's still a lot of fraud going on even with these types of logos. One of the things we see a lot in user testing, for example, is the logo of like a government body being present instantly signifies to the user, okay, this seems legit. Whereas from a technical point of view, it's really easy to just place that logo on any website. So it gives, I don't want to say it gives a false sense of trust, but it's not something that a user can generally trust on. It's something they trust on, but it's not a valid source of trust, really. For example, Thuiswinkel, I believe, has the option that if you click on the logo, it takes you to their website, and then it basically shows like an information page about that specific store on the website. And then organizations like Trustpilot are, of course, used more and more to get your feedback and your reviews. And it's definitely something that I will generally use whenever I look up, whether that's a store I don't know or a restaurant or what, to gain people's opinion. And luckily we're seeing, I think, a bit more of a balance in terms of like, okay, if people have a good experience, they're also leaving a review, whereas we definitely had a period where only people that had bad reviews or bad things to say took the time to go out. I think they've made a lot of steps into making that review process easier or the barrier for people to go and place a review easier, and that makes the end result a lot more useful these days.
I couldn't agree more. And I can see, like, some of you have also said what's important elements of trust on our website. It is things like certificates or customer testimonials and backlinks, right? And all of these elements, the Dutch one, the A-market in Denmark, which is the e-commerce stamp of approval here in Denmark, and whether it's Trustpilot or G2 reviews, whatever you may be cross-linking to, because you're connecting to other trusted areas in the digital world, that's what's kind of reinforcing that trust. And I think what you said, Ronnie, as well, is like, it's funny that it's in some ways a micro element that is trustworthy and not, but at the same time, if you don't have them, then people will be like, well, is it a reputable organization or website? Is this the right website? So it's like you said, it's not just one thing. You can't just slap these logos on there and say, hey, I'm good from a trust perspective. There needs to be multiple things that are connected to it as well. One of the other things that some of you have actually mentioned as well, which I love because it is so long ago since Google actually implemented this, but it is what's the last thing on our screen here, which is SSL certificates. And believe it, more often than not, I'm still seeing websites that do not have an SSL certificate. It is such a basic element, but there are still websites that have that today. And so while it seems very obvious, we did just want to put that in here as well. Ronnie, I don't know if you have anything else to add on that.
Yeah, it definitely still happens, and there's literally no reason why it should, because you can most web hosts offer this by default. It should be on by default. And if not, or if you're self-hosting, there's even like free ways to still get SSL certificates for your domain. The name is escaping me at the top of my head, but
we can send it out on the follow-up when it comes back
yeah,
to you.
I'll do a quick search.
Awesome. So we have a bunch of other elements, and we're not going to talk through each one of these one by one. We just wanted to put together kind of a comprehensive list here, and we'll share the slides afterwards as well. But we do have a couple of other examples that we want to talk through that are quite interesting and maybe a little bit more nuanced than you think. We talked about the consistency of website design as a very important factor, and we showed you 4 different websites that were very similarly structured. Another thing that Ronnie and I talked about is how that's actually very culturally impacted. And a funny thing is in Scandinavia, for example, and I actually saw someone else mention it here too, is in Scandinavia, we like very clean, contemporary website designs with no pop-ups, for example. So it gives a very minimalistic but very direct experience that guides you. For example, in Asia, I used to live there, and their websites actually look very different. They can be very busy. The more content that's available on the website, the more things flashing. And these are generalizations, so please don't take my word for that. Every single website is like this, but there are cultural differences. In the US, for example, you'll more often see big pictures of people. And so all of these things are also interesting because depending on who you're trying to target with your website as well, there might be microcultural factors that impact how people perceive your website as well. Ronnie, is there anything specific that you've ever experienced along these lines, or maybe something very specific in the Dutch market? Who knows?
No, not well. I think one of the things I wanted to touch upon, I think, was the part where, on the one hand, there's a lot of things you can do for digital trust, and then on the other hand, sometimes you're at the mercy of somebody else or somebody else's bad experience. One of the things that often stands out in that regard is people's reluctance to use chat interfaces on a website, for example, because they generally are AI slash language model powered. People often have difficulty getting the right answer out of it, and just go and try and game the system to get it to hopefully either connect to a real human or get it to actually spit out a telephone number so they can actually call somebody. And then you might have invested in creating a great chat that is either has like a very large language model behind it that knows how to interpret questions and still come up with a good answer, or you might even have a chat function that directly connects to your first line support without any automation, and people would still be reluctant to even click on the icon and initiate the chat because they've had such a bad experience and their trust is damaged from other websites. So that's the thing where you can do pretty much everything you want, but you're gonna have a tough time regaining somebody's trust because somebody else damaged it.
I think that's a really good point, especially also when you're picking, like, not all elements on your website might be ones that you've set up yourself as part of your website. It might be linking to third-party integrations or third-party, for example, checkout flows if you do e-commerce, and making sure that that setup is seamless as well is incredibly important. And like you said, you're at the mercy, just like with the chatbot, depending on what experiences people have previously had with those providers. It may or may not be a good experience or a sign of trust or not trust for them. One of the other things that I also thought of was this also goes for personalization, right? Like there's lots of great tools out there for personalizing the website experience. So maybe there's an upcoming event that you want to promote specifically to people in a region. Well, then it makes sense to promote that on your website to people from a certain country, for example, but maybe it doesn't make sense for everyone else. And that can also be a good or bad experience depending on how you set that up.
Yeah, true. True. Yeah, I think one of the other things we were talking about this just before we went live, that relates to what the external trust I was talking about. I mean, my wife and I had the opportunity to go on a lovely trip this weekend, and when we arrived at one of the tourist stations, there was a long queue, and I thought, well, I'm a smart technical guy. I can go online and book me some tickets and save me the 20-minute wait. So I whipped out my phone, and the website was in Portuguese, so I used it auto translated, and I was able to make enough sense out of it to get to the tickets and put some in my cart and started to pay for it. And then I went on to try and pay for it. And initially, one of the payment options didn't work, so I went back, tried it again with a method that's supported by my own bank instead of PayPal. Went and paid, and then waited for 20 minutes, saw everyone in the queue slowly move along, but I did not get an email with tickets. Went to the counter, had to luckily I could then bypass the queue a bit, apparently because I had a legitimate reason, but had to basically buy new tickets. See, the lady was like, yeah, sorry, this happens quite a lot. You should get your money back. So bought new tickets, and then yes, the next day I did get an email that the payment had failed to process. But it's a bad experience. That meant that on the other occasions that we tried and went and go somewhere inside and had a queue, I was like, yeah, just let's just stick to the queue this time, because my trust was damaged. I'm not taking that risk again, at least not on this trip.
Completely understand that. I would probably do the same thing. And that just goes to show how much like the offline to online or online to offline experience matters. I had a similar experience, but the other way around, where I was ordering something online, actually a bag, and I thought it was brown. And when I received it, it was actually black. And I was like, well, that's strange. I don't trust the images on this website anymore. And when I tried to return it, they're like, well, why are you returning it? And I was like, well, because your images on the website don't match. And then they were like, oh, okay, fair enough. So it really goes to show, like, depending on what the user is expecting, that online offline experience is incredibly important. Just conscious of time as well, because I know we've been talking for quite a bit now, and I do want to get to all your questions. One other thing that I also just want to highlight, and I think this fits in really nicely a little bit what Ronnie talked about with web accessibility, but compliance, as there, everything with digital trust, we're seeing more and more compliance elements coming into it. So I know we've written compliance statements, having something like a privacy policy or GDPR or terms of use, but also there's new legislation coming, for example, in Europe next year, the European Accessibility Act. So some of these digital trust elements, also protection of personal data, they are coming as more legislative elements now as well. So while we talk about it as, yes, digital trust is important for you to prioritize, and maybe you need to have one person responsible for it, there's more elements than just the design and the content or the technical experience of being able to pay for tickets and get them sent to you right away. There is also a legal aspect of it. And I think that's something that if you're working on a website, that you need to increasingly think about. And I know it's one of those things that a lot of website managers, as they're working on websites, is one of those things they worry about a little bit, because we're not legal experts, right? We're trying to create a good website experience for users, but compliance and legislation and privacy and ethics are all playing a bigger and bigger part of it. But with that, I do just want to wrap it up so that we can do some of the Q&A, but I do also want to offer a free website scan. So if you're curious, if you have a broken link on your website, for example, which is damaging the digital trust of your website, or if you have a spelling error that's confusing people, we actually, and I forgot to mention this earlier, Moncito is a tool that scans your website and helps find these issues. and errors. So I'm going to launch a poll here, and we'd love to help you out with, let me see if it wants to. It is not cooperating right now. So I would like to ask Kristen if you don't mind launching the poll, but we'd love to help out with a scan if that is something that you're interested in. And then I was thinking, oh, thank you so much, Kristen, for launching. So there's a poll now. So if you're interested in getting a scan, we'd love to help out with that. We'll reach out to you tomorrow to follow up with which website you'd like scanned. But let's kick it off with some of the Q&A because there's a lot of great questions in here. And I'm going to start with the first one for you, Ronnie, because it's really related to accessibility. And if you could touch on some of the best ways of implementing accessibility for no-code platforms, for example.
Yeah, so no code platforms. So assuming we're talking things like Squarespace, for example, or WordPress has like the building block Elementor. Is it Elementor, I think? Oh, is it can be a bit tricky, mostly because you're taking a deliberate approach of having a somewhat more easy to use and CMS in some way. The downside of it is that you have less control of it. I know, for example, that organizations might have standards in place. I know Shopify has a standard in place, like a theme for Shopify needs to adhere to certain accessibility standards, for example. That doesn't mean that it's going to be fully accessibility compliant out of the box. And the same goes for Squarespace. Like, I think they have a couple of themes that are considered accessible. There's always a bit of like a content author type of interaction as well, like doing the right things with your building blocks. That plays into it. For some of the more technical things, you might have to look into custom integrations. We've had a previous instance where we basically coded in a skip link functionality, for example, into a Squarespace website. So there's ways of getting your own code added into it. But overall, it's a concession you make between like ease of use versus flexibility of being able to actually resolve something.
I think that's a good point, Ronnie. It's just all about going back to the basics and making sure that accessibility is built into your templates to begin with. So if you're using a platform where you're using a lot of templatized things, instead of going in and making those accessibility fixes on every site, make sure that the template you're using to begin with has that skip link built in there, and it makes your life a lot easier in the long run and makes your website a lot more inclusive as well.
Yep.
Definitely. The next question we have, and I can see we also have a similar question in the Q&A now, is around the best size for cookie consent banners and just in general best practices for cookie consent banners. Another person here is saying that they're struggling with cookie consent banners these days because you don't like giving consent to all these cookies, especially on websites you don't trust, or a site, or on some sites you don't even have the option of refusing to give consent. Any guidelines on that? We were talking about this prior to going on live, and I actually think there's a twofold here. And this is what's so interesting again with digital trust, is there's all these micro elements. So in some ways, I think having a cookie banner on your website signifies some element of trust, because you know that you need it to be compliant. You're taking the appropriate steps to make sure that you're respecting users' privacy. But at the same time, if you then have a cookie banner set up where you can't refuse to give consent, which is often the cases of websites that are not based out of Europe, for example, then that creates a negative experience. So I don't necessarily say that there's any guidelines on it. The most important thing is that maybe, and this is often a discussion for your organization, do you take the most extreme interpretation and always let people choose, or are you operating in a region that has other legislation and regulation that allows it? The challenge is our world is so global today. So even though you say, I'm a business, I'm only doing business in North America, you can't stop a European organization from going to your website. Well, you can, but most don't. So, but Ronnie, what about you? Do you have any thoughts on cookie consent and cookie banners?
No, that's just wanna continue what you were saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm in a Slack channel with some more accessibility people, and just the other day we had a screenshot shared there of a cookie banner by a well-known cookie implementation provider.
Mhm.
And the website owner had actively removed the button to decline or to reject the use of cookies, which would make it, like I said, it would fail GDPR reasons. Because the user needs to have the choice to not have additional cookies be set. And yeah, that's again just instantly makes me less trust your website less, because you're preventing me from exerting my online rights. Just a really bad. I mean, in terms of like how big it should be and how you should present it, there's a million ways to go about that. And I would generally say make it as convenient for the user to allow them to make their choice.
Agreed.
Uh,
And make sure that your cookie banner is accessible. A lot of people don't know, but that's one of those big like pop-ups, any kind of overlay on your website, cookie banners being one of them. Make sure they're accessible. That's one of the big things that often blocks people from being able to navigate your site. We have
it's
one, oh, go ahead.
it's uncommon for them to be missed in an accessibility audit because of that reason.
Yeah.
Because someone has already looked at the website and has gone through the click action. It's now no longer presented, and then suddenly it's being missed in an actual audit by that person. So yeah, if you're having an audit conducted and you know you have a cookie banner, make sure that it's covered.
And I'll just give a little plug because Moncito has a cookie banner and it's accessible. So if anyone's looking for one, please do feel free to reach out. One last question before we just wrap up. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but it's another great question, and I think it's a perfect thing to sum up because it relates both to accessibility, but also the overall user experience. So it's actually in relation to readability. And if you have a difficult to read score, how do you improve this if many words need to be used due to your sector, for example, healthcare? I'll give you my 2 cents from a marketing and communications point of view. I think it's a great question because there are more technical verbiage sometimes needed. I like to use different tools to try to see how difficult the language that I'm putting out is, but also depends on your audience. So if you're trying to target the masses, then of course your language needs to be simpler. And then maybe what you do is you create a little definition, or at least as you go along, you make sure to define some of these more technical terminology to help people along the way. But at the same time, if your page that you're creating is targeted towards doctors and nurses, I think it's okay for it to be more technical. So it also depends on the context of your information, to what degree the information and the readability level should be. But of course, if it's something that's for the general public, keeping that readability level as low as possible and then defining along the way is definitely a very helpful way to go about it. But that was my 2 cents. Ronnie, do you have anything to add before we wrap up?
I think that covers it pretty well. It's like from an accessibility point of view, like reading comprehension levels are they sit under like the AAA level, so it's generally not necessary when it comes to meeting any regulations. And the reason for that is being it's just really hard to properly determine what the actual reading level is. like English isn't my first language, so I don't have a degree in English. So who am I to say whether a text reading level is appropriate or not? I wouldn't even be able to say that for Dutch without with any serious backing. But yeah, tailor it to your target audience, and if that's a mixed audience, consider having a mixed presentation. So I think something we're seeing a lot more of when it comes to user agreement updates with software. It's like have an easy to understand paragraph, and then if people need more information or legal jargon, have that sit below it as a further explanation, and then that way you can serve both audiences in one go.
Great point. Great point. Wonderful. Well, with that, we've been on this Q&A slide. We've been doing Q&A for quite some time, but with that, we did just want to share some resources as well. When we share the link out to this deck, we'll put links here as well. So we have a couple of different things that you can check out. We have an accessibility statement generator, some blog posts. Numensa also has an accessibility assessment. But with that, we just really want to say thank you so much for joining. We'd love for you. I know Ronnie's a superstar and super active on LinkedIn and posts lots of great accessibility tips. I like to think that I sometimes post useful information about the website user experience and things like digital trust. But thanks so much for joining us. Our contact details are here. We'll send out the deck and the recording in a couple of days if you want to share with anyone. And thank you so much for joining. And thank you, Ronnie, for joining us. It's been such a pleasure having you.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me, and thank you everyone for joining us on this on the past 45 minutes. It's been hopefully it's been very useful.
Yeah, I hope so too. Bye everyone. Thank you.
Bye all.